what advice would you give somebody looking to get into the hotel development business? What caused you to go into development versus operations? Are we going to see a continuation of all these new hotels going up? We're going to see some foreclosures. We'd like to welcome our listeners to the Boulos Beat podcast. I'm your host, Greg Boulos. The Boulos Company is Northern New England's largest commercial real estate services firm with offices in Portland, Maine and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We've been selling and leasing real estate in Maine and New Hampshire since 1975. This is a series providing insight into Maine's real estate movers and shakers. And speaking of movers and shakers,
oh God,
our special guest today is Marc Dugas. Hello, Marc.
hi.
Marc's a Portland area-based hotel developer and consultant. He's a third-generation hotelier and spent his entire life growing up in and around the industry. According to his peers, Marc is known as the hotel guru and is a person you go to when you have questions about developing a hotel. Marc and his wife, Lori, have two children, Sophie, who is 20, and Sarah, who is 27. Welcome, Marc. Thanks
Good to be here.
Marc, you founded Dugas Development, LLC in 2012 and currently have ownership interests in 10 franchised and independent hotels and asset managing 3 new hotels. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Where are some of these hotels that you own?
Oh boy, many of them were that I developed with the Olympia companies. Kevin Mahaney.
Yep.
Met Kevin after we sold the Black Point Inn. For 2 years, I was looking around up and down the coast for a development opportunity. Met Kevin because we were both looking at the same piece of land in downtown Portland, which is today the Hilton Garden Inn. So over the course of the next year, Kevin asked me to come aboard. I managed one of his properties, the old Doubletree Hotel, which is now a Clarion.
On Congress Street in Portland.
Correct, right. And ran that through 2001, which was a blast.
And you say that because?
Well, travel came to a near stop.
Because of 9/11.
Exactly, yeah.
But we were talking earlier and you said it came to a stop, but in Portland, it wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't that bad. It was bad for a short period and for a select few hotels that had airline contracts around the mall. Downtown Portland was not nearly as affected. And it's about 4 months there after 9/11 that travel really curtailed. And then what happens always, pent up demand, it picked up in the later months and more than compensated. We ended up that forward 12 months after the event down about 1% in revenue per available room.
Which is
not bad, because Boston saw about a 20 to 25%.
Because they're so dependent
drop.
on international trade.
Yes. If you're
And tourists.
if you're traveling internationally, you stopped traveling by plane. So there was a lot of drive-to locations that weren't affected nearly as much. Burlington, Vermont, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, all relatively unscathed through that event, which I see a lot of similarities to this, what's going on currently.
Marc, you're an avid runner, and your running partner is Vin Verino, who we previously interviewed.
Yes.
And Larry Wold, who's the president of TD Bank here in Maine.
Yes.
That's quite a well-connected group. As a result of that, any deals ever come out of your miles of pounding the pavement together?
Yes, yeah, with Vin. Actually, that's after doing 10 or so hotels with the Olympia companies. I still didn't finish my answer. I still have about 6, 7 hotels, I think, with the Olympia companies all over New England. Vin wanted to do a hotel on Commercial Street on an old parking lot, which used to be back in the J.B. Brown early days, the molasses plant that went up in flames, and that started the whole Great Fire of Portland.
That's when the whole city burned down, right?
Exactly.
About 1860 something.
Exactly. So that he had.
Do you remember that?
No, but Peter Anastas does.
Yes,
He
of course
tells me
would.
all
Of
about
course
it.
he would, yes.
Anyways, Vin asked me to take a look at the site, and I did. We, when I was still with Olympia, we were going to do a Hampton there, but things got a little scary there in 2008. Everybody pulled back, and a couple years went by, and he asked me again. I said, you know, there'd be one flag. I think that would work really well there, and we ended up building the Courtyard.
Courtyard Marriott, right?
Exactly.
And that particular hotel that you developed, as I recall, the top floor are condos,
Condos, yep.
and the bottom floor, there's a is it Tika, the restaurant?
Yeah, it's a mixed-use
And
development.
that's a condo that was sold off. And what's the strategy behind doing that?
Reducing your basis in the hotel and in the overall development. It certainly enabled, I think, J.B. Brown to get the land cost to where they thought was appropriate, and I put a lot of risk delta into my underwriting for hotels. You know, if it's not doing a 20% cash on cash return on year 3 stabilization, it's not. They're too hard. Hotels it's not the real estate business. It's an operating business. Mm-hmm. And if you're constantly worried about paying debt, it's, I want to sleep at night.
Mark, with all the running that you do, you seem like you're a pretty fit guy. Tell us the story about the prudent and well thought out plan you and your friend hatched to scale One Canal Plaza.
Oh God, no, that wasn't
a
running. That was back in the '80s when I was still in my family's old business, the Black Point Inn days, working for my father. I was front office manager, and I was pretty into climbing. We were up in North Conway regularly, almost every day off, climbing in the White Mountains. And we got the idea of climbing your building, right? Aren't you in there now?
Well, yes,
or
our offices are at One Canal.
Yeah, Tim Soley owns it now, right?
He does.
So we had the idea of we went out and bought some cams, which would fit perfectly into that crack, and we did a test climb the week before, and then my father got a word that we were going to attempt this and threatened to fire me on the spot. So it was only my friend actually did it and made it to the top, and I bailed him out of jail.
And was he arrested?
Yeah, of course. But the fire department and the police department were so excited about talking to him at the top, so they
didn't cuff him or anything.
it wasn't a nasty
And I
situation.
assume that was done on a weekend, not during the weekday, or?
It was done in the middle of the night.
Oh.
I think he started. This is Peter Latai. He's a perfusionist up in Eastern Maine Medical Center now. But
You'll
yeah,
have
that
to
was
send
a
him
fun
copy
time.
of this
Yeah,
interview.
yeah, he'll love that. If his kids don't know, they'll know now.
Hey, by the way, how'd you happen to come to Maine? Because you weren't born here.
My father took a job with Dumphy Corporation.
Yeah.
So everything that I've done in my career is all because of my parents. You know, they taught me all about hard work. My father came out of the Army. He says with $50 in his pocket. Was married, living in a basement apartment in D.C. He went to work for a tiny little company, hot shop company. Hot Shops. Remember the Hot Shops?
Yeah.
See, you're older than me. And
Thank you, Mark. We'll be editing that.
And it turned out to be Marriott Corporation. And they had one hotel at the time. They were opening a second, the Keybridge Marriott, and they hired him to be the front office manager.
Really?
Yeah. So during the time period that he was there, the Democratic National Convention was in town, and he met the Dunphy family. And
the rest is history, and
the
then the
rest
whole
is
family
history.
got involved.
Right, yeah. Then he left them in early 70s, went to work at the Mount Washington Hotel as general manager because he was doing too much travel. And that put the entire family to work because there's nothing to do in Bretton Woods. So all my sisters
skiing.
and myself were working, skiing in the winter. But Mount Washington, the summer we would spend shoveling out stalls or welcome wagons with bus tours, or wherever he needed extra bodies, we were there.
You know, and speaking about Washington Hotel, as you said, you used to clean out stalls, you and your sister, but there's more. You used to do more than that. Weren't you a ball boy? At one time? What's
Sorry,
the story
I brought
behind
that up. So my father started Volvo tournament up at the Mount Washington Hotel.
Tennis tournament.
Yeah, the tennis tournament, which is much bigger than it was today than it was back then. But there were several thousand people watching the tournament, and you know, Arthur Ashe was there, and Jimmy Connors, and all these
the big
names I
stars.
knew nothing about
And how
at the
old
time.
were you at the time?
I had to be 13, I want to say,
Just a kid.
roughly. And they needed a couple of ball boys, and you know, there was nobody around, so they pulled us out of the barn, my sister Michelle and myself, and sent us down into there was this one tennis court with an amphitheater looking into it, just covered. The back porch of the hotel was covered with people watching us in the amphitheater, and of course we were told to, you know, the ball comes, you run, get it, get to the other side, throw the ball to one of the players.
And you had never done this before?
Never. And so we were throwing the ball to the wrong player constantly, and the entire lawn was laughing at us. And
Kind of like Kramer, that episode of Seinfeld.
it's like a bad dream.
When he was the ball boy on
Yeah,
at the US Open.
exactly, yeah. Yeah.
But he's a little older than you were at the time. Did you run into a play or anything? Or
I didn't run into anybody, but I constantly threw the ball to the wrong person.
and you did get your picture taken, right, with some of the players?
I think we were in a couple of pictures that were in the hallway for years in the basement of the hotel, but you were so small you can't
But you didn't
see us.
realize really who
We had
these
no idea.
powerhouses
No.
were. Yeah.
No, they were tennis players.
Going back to work for a moment, as I understand it, you have had two careers.
Yeah.
First 20 years or so you were in operations,
Right.
and then the next 20 years in development. And you said earlier you worked for Kevin Mahaney, and you made the switch. You know, what caused you to go into development versus operations?
Well, that was all Kevin, you know, and he saw something, I don't know what, in me. He wanted me to get out of operations, because the plan was we would build the Hilton Garden Inn, I would operate it. And he talked me into becoming his vice president of business development. Because I had a lot of contact over the last 25 years or so. I was on the board of New England Innkeepers, Maine and Keepers. I knew a lot of people in the industry, and he thought it might be helpful. And what he didn't tell me is, you know, is how to develop. So I had to do a lot of self learning, and I did get a half an hour meeting with him in the lobby of the Hilton Garden Inn, where he says, "Mark, it's very simple. It's loan to cost, loan to value, and debt service coverage ratios." And I'm like, "All right."
So you got a half hour with Kevin. That's a lot. That's a long time.
That's more than I think anybody else has gotten.
Let me ask you this. I get asked this question all the time, and I'm sure you do because of the business that you're
Yeah.
in. But the question is, you know, how can Portland support any more hotels? And do you think there's a bubble forming? And keep in mind, as we speak, I think there are 4 hotels in Portland that have just come out of the ground or are about to come out of the ground on top of all the new hotels that have gone up. Can it continue?
Yeah. Well, it's all about supply and demand. You know, demand has so far done a good job keeping up. You know, our worst year was really, is it 2014, where we had the Westin coming out of renovation. The Courtyard was opening. There were about 3 hotels coming out at that time. We added about 24% supply, but that was after a year where the Eastland Park closed down completely. So we really had closer to a 10, 12% increase in supply. This one, might be a little bit different because, we've had 10 good years. Typically we work on a 10-year cycle. 7 to 10 years, we hit some sort of correction. If you're not underwriting the property conservatively at this particular time, you might have some problems. But not, Portland is a resilient market. It's let's just say this. In the 90s when we had the Black Point Inn,
Right.
we were reluctant to send anybody to downtown Portland to have a good time. It was always we'd send them to Freeport.
Why is that?
A lot's happened to Portland over the last 15
because Portland
years.
wasn't as attractive.
Yeah,
right?
regentrified. I mean, look, the Old Port district is a great place. It's, people from all my old college roommates and friends in Boston want to be up in Portland. If they could find a job up here, they'd probably be up here.
Yeah.
It's just a great place to be, and I think it's and I think this will see a correction. It'll probably hurt the hotels that are over leveraged. Like I said earlier, if you're not building in, a 15 and 20%, risk buffer into your underwriting for these assets, you could have a problem at the end of a cycle.
It's some of the new hotels that are either just being built or are going to come out of the ground. They're Cambria Suites, which is where Shipyard
Cambria
is.
is the shipyard.
What's the one on
The
Commercial?
Aloft, which is a Marriott property right next to the Courtyard.
Yes.
And then there
And then Jim
is
Brady's putting up one.
a Canopy by Hilton.
Okay.
So
And is
yeah,
there
that's
a
about
fourth
20 some odd percent, 400
increase?
rooms or so. So 20 some odd percent addition to supply. So
And is there a fourth hotel? Or did I imagine that?
well, there's about 3 more that are being talked about right now.
amazing.
4 if you include just off the peninsula.
Let's switch cities. Cape Neddick, Maine. You know what I'm going to ask you.
Yes.
You and Peter Nastus and others were involved with the purchase and renovation of the Cliff House, which is, I've never been there and I'm still waiting for an invitation, but I understand it's a magnificent property based on the pictures I've seen.
Well, you
right
can
on
come
the water.
anytime you want,
Except high
and
season.
I'm not surprised Pete didn't invite you.
Yeah, well, you know how that
That's
is.
just PP&P.
So how many rooms is that resort? How did you get involved? And how extensive were the renovations?
Well, it was 167 rooms when we purchased it. Catherine Weir, the former owner, it had been in her family since the railroad went in the 1800s. So that's how long that, and her great-great-grandmother built an inn for artists to come up on the railroad from New York and Boston. Algonquin was an artist community, and she would house these people. And when Catherine took over the family business, she developed some pretty grand plans for developing that location. It had 70 acres right on the water. You don't find that a lot anymore.
Does it still have 70 acres?
Still has 70 acres. And we've developed about 20 some odd acres so far. When we purchased it from her, she did tell us that she had plans in perpetuity, permits in perpetuity, to build on an additional wing. And so I give her a lot of credit for thinking ahead, putting a lot of forethought into getting this completely permitted for the full build out back in the 80s. She had every planning board member sign the plans, and so that she could develop it over time to its maximum extent.
So you came in and did that expansion?
Yes. So it was a big project. I mean, this was going to be the project to end all projects for me. That was going to be my
Either
the
one,
end of
either
my-
good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I told my wife, we'll be either living
high on the hog or
Yeah, yeah,
down at the soup kitchen.
exactly.
But it turned out well for you.
It did. It did. You know, after talking to her for about 10 years, she finally sat down with me and said she's ready to retire. We came up with a number that suited her, and we went to town. We operated as is for a year or two just to understand what we had and what we needed to be. And then we went through some extremely intense design and operational meetings to lay out what we ultimately built, which is now a 262. I'll probably have the number of rooms wrong. Room hotel. The nice thing about that property is that it's a single loaded corridor property, so nearly every room has a waterfront. The backside of the hotel's corridor.
So when you say that, so the corridor runs down,
Corridor runs out. There's only rooms on one side of the corridor.
which is very unusual.
On most of the hotel, yeah. There's only one stack of hotel rooms that has a double-sided, but there's still a view from there up the coast.
Touching on a little more serious subject, the coronavirus is all over the news these days. Is that having an impact on any hotels in Portland right now, or do you expect that it will?
Well, very similar to 2001, where it was fear-driven demand decline when people didn't want to get on a plane after 9/11. I think the hotels that have airline contracts might get hit. We don't do a lot of international travel or group in Greater Portland, so I think we'll be fairly unscathed. The university markets worry me a little bit. We have one hotel that I oversee in Burlington, Vermont, that does that Burlington has 4 universities, and that
Highly
they're
dependent on the.
exactly. So they're worried that that students are being told not to come back after the break, and we don't know what's going to happen after that. It might be another 2 weeks before they come back, but I'm hoping it's going to be, I hope it's going to be short-lived. It is going to impact Boston. There's no doubt about it. There are international conventions coming into the convention center, airlines, inbound traffic. As I was saying before the interview, China made up about 1% of inbound international travel to the United States. Back in 2001, it now makes up 7%. That's a pretty good number.
Yeah, and they're not traveling, so.
And they're not traveling.
So that should probably affect Boston more than Portland.
Absolutely, yeah. Back in 2001, Portland saw a slide of about negative 1% revenue per available room. We're going to, I expect that we'll see maybe a little bit more than that because we're at the end of the cycle. As you said,
Right.
There's more product coming on board. But Boston, back in 2001, saw a 20-plus slide in revenue per available room.
Yeah, and that's huge.
That's huge.
Well, let's hope this is all short-lived, the virus.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. I've checked around, and everybody I speak with, I did a little research on you. Everybody I speak with really sings your praises. So I've come to the conclusion
I paid them well.
they don't know you that well, right?
There you go.
But all kidding aside, I understand you are a fiercely loyal friend. That's what keeps coming out. And I was just wondering, where does that stem from? Or is it true? maybe it's not true.
They have bad judgment.
Yeah.
No, everything that I've done in life has been because of other people. Like I said, it started with my parents, and it continued with my lovely bride, Lori. She's, we made some incredible, we took some incredible risks after the Black Point Inn days.
Yeah.
And they happened to pay off. But, I always say any other wife might have said, absolutely not. You're, get a 9-to-5 job.
And you would do what you're told, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And how long have you been married?
Oh gosh, we're now on 32 years. So
Well, congratulations.
yeah, but it's those people and the Kevin Mahaney's and the Vin Veranos, and I learned so much from these groups that I'm involved with. The running group, like I said, Larry Wald. You have a question, banking or on real estate, or we've got the smartest guys in the city running every day at noon.
Yeah.
It's a great place to just ping a thought.
Yeah, it's a productive running group.
It is.
Right? I mean,
It
really.
is.
Maybe
I can't afford not to show up.
Most people have some core beliefs in terms of how they run a business, and you didn't know I was going to ask you this question, but do you have some core beliefs in terms of how you run your business, how you run your life?
I think it's really basic for me. It's 100% honesty and being as 100% non-judgmental as you can possibly be.
Right.
I learned that in the Black Point Inn days. You can't judge people. There's people. It also taught me that there are no important people, because we had many celebrities at the Black Point Inn over the years, and when you got to know them, they were just people.
Any interesting stories?
Oh my God. Too many for this podcast, probably.
Maybe just one.
I'm not sure if I should be naming names.
It's fine. Nobody's going to hear this.
All right.
You won't tell anybody.
Well, Don Mattingly, great guy.
Yep.
I remember meeting him at the front desk. Mickey Mantle, meeting him over the front desk, was a great guy, but unfortunately I was also a night otter at those days, and I could see him at night, and he really had his demons with drinking.
Oh, really?
And Stephen Stills was my hero with Crosby, Stills, Nash and
sure.
Young, and he came to stay, and he was no longer my hero afterwards.
After you saw how he really was.
It's all how you treat people, The same thing at the Clarion when, we had the, we were in the middle of an election year, and, Bradley came through and was not so nice to the employees, and didn't want to meet anybody, and so other politicians were extremely nice and called them out and wanted to meet everybody and shake their hands. And
I always say that you can really tell the character of a person by how they treat somebody who can't do anything for them. How they treat
Right.
a waiter or a waitress or the guy cleaning the floors.
Right.
And if they everybody treats, somebody they perceive as important, they'll fall all over them. But how do they treat the guy who can't do anything for them?
And I credit 100% my parents for making sure that I was that guy.
That you stayed
in every
humble.
single, yes, I was the dishwasher, the pot washer. I did all the worst jobs in the industry, and they didn't bring me from that to the next year managing the front office. Right. It was very slow rise. Years working on maintenance and years working in the wait staff.
Switching subjects, what was the first property you purchased or developed?
Well, it would have been with Kevin as a partner on the Hilton Garden Inn.
Okay.
And that taught me a lot on, Jim Brady is fantastic with design. He was fun to work with.
Because Jim worked for Mahaney at that time.
Yeah, it was just Jim, Kevin, myself, and
we
a
interviewed
few
Jim
other guys.
as well.
Oh,
And-
good.
And as, I don't know if our guests know, but Jim owns and developed the Press Hotel,
Right.
which is
I think
very
the best,
successful.
the best, design project in Portland.
Yeah, so
and-
that was quite
and
a
I've told
team.
him that.
That was quite a team.
It was, yeah, we were pretty driven back then. And then, there was a host of projects that came right after. We did the Hilton Garden Inn down in Portsmouth, New Hampshire,
Yep.
for Catharsis Investments, and we were a partner for a while there until they bought us out. We bought the Hampton South Portland. I did the North Conway Hampton Inn Suite. It was the first Hampton Inn with a small water park inside, so that was
All familiar with, yeah.
that was a different development. What else did we do? Mystic, Connecticut in 2008, where, it seemed like a good project at the time, and then 2008 hit, and
All hell broke loose.
yeah, it was kind of disagreement of when we should pull the plug, and we ended up not pulling the plug, and we still own it today.
And it's successful.
It's doing all right. Yeah, it's not what we had hoped for, but it's we're not feeding it every month.
Yeah, it'd be negative cash flow.
And then one that we did with you, bought your property, and you're still a partner with me on
Up
that
in
one.
Nashua, New Hampshire,
Nashua, Hampton Inn and Suites, right?
right? Which I bought the land from Peter and Astis.
Right. And then there was
it's a very small world.
And then Peter, of course, I met when I was leaving Olympia. We were going to build the hotel next to Hanover, New Hampshire, Dartmouth College, and he called me out of the blue, and it's what a great guy Peter is. And
Actually,
and we have a million stories about Peter, about what a great guy he is, but this one, I tell everybody
Yeah,
because
tell the story about how ethical Peter is.
well, Peter, he knew that I had been working years trying to secure a piece of land in downtown Hanover, because every time something came available, Dartmouth College would pick it up immediately to expand their campus. And I finally got a piece of land secured. And because of some other things going on in Olympia, we didn't continue with the project, which, was years of work slipping through my fingers. And Peter picked it up because he knew the GC that we were talking to.
Was that Opeachy?
Opeachy Construction. Right. Yeah, Mark Woglum. And out of the blue, I get a call from Peter. He says, "Mark, I know you've been working forever on this project. If you want in, you're in." And can you imagine that from
No.
many developers?
Most developers would not do that, because he could have just as easily done it without you.
Absolutely, yeah. Most people would. And that's why, it's, as my attorney once told me, a good partner is worth 20 attorneys. And Peter and Paul and the rest of them have just been, Vin too, talk about integrity. Yeah. Vin Verino and J.B. Brown, and just how lucky I am to be associated with those people.
Mark, when you consider developing a piece of property for a hotel, what are you looking for that says, hey, this is going to be a good site, this is going to be a good project?
Mixed demand drivers. Certainly, I would never go into, a Boston market that's driven by 80% corporate negotiated rates, meaning, just corporate travel.
Right.
I want a good mix of leisure. Because the leisure bump in the summer in New England is where you get all of your ADR.
ADR for?
Average daily rate, sorry. So, the Portland market in the winter might average 110, 120 average daily rate. But, we're up, you'll see weekends in the summer up as high as $800 a night. That's not corporate travel, that's your transient.
More expensive than Boston. In many instances.
In many instances, yes.
Of all the projects you've done, do you have a favorite project, and do you have a least favorite project?
I could say the Cliff House for both, because and Peter and I like to joke that we both had a full head of hair before this project started. It was definitely the hardest thing I think either one of us had ever done for a project, but through that hardship, always comes the greatest, feeling at the end when it all comes together and the guests like it, and and it's successful. I would say that everything that's happened to me in my life has basically resulted in the Cliff House coming to fruition.
Which is, as I said before, magnificent project and property.
Thank you. Well, and it's pretty good knowing that you haven't even seen it yet.
Yeah.
Says something.
Yeah, rub it in. Yeah. A lot of banks in Portland and in Maine.
Yeah.
Any favorite banks?
Bangor Savings is, I have to say, right up there. What a great relationship we've had with them through the Courtyard. Yeah. I know J.B. Brown uses them quite a bit. I had never used them too much. I knew some people there, but there's a whole host of banks, though. I don't want to just single out a few.
Because you'll forget some, and you'll feel
I
bad.
know, feel bad for the rest. Yeah.
Before we started this interview, we were talking about some of the banks looking at hospitality industry a little bit differently. What can you explain what's going on there? And why?
Well, I just got off of a phone call last night with a representative from a larger Boston bank, and he says that, on the hospitality side, and we were talking about a project that we're looking at maybe refinancing. And he said, it's, the last 5 or 6 years, we've been in charge. He says, now everything's going straight to risk.
The risk department.
Right. And the risk department is filtering before it comes back to us.
Is that because of the coronavirus?
I think it's coronavirus is one thing. I think they're worried about the end of the cycle. We got also, what's people aren't talking about right now is the war going on between Russia and Saudi Arabia with
Oil.
the oil. And it's just instability. When that's all economics is. If you can't predict the future, creates instability in the markets
And uncertainty,
yeah,
and investors hate uncertainty.
right.
Well, speaking of this cycle that we're in, I mean, the last 10 years have been unbelievable, and there's a lot of folks who have gotten into the hotel business, gotten into real estate brokerage, development, you name it, banking, who've never seen a downturn, and I think we're both old enough, we've seen a few. Any war stories from past 20 years when you got hit by a recession, and what did that do to you? How did that affect you?
The one that hurt the most probably was when I was contracted to run the Doubletree Hotel for Kevin when we first met before we got the Hilton Garden Inn going, and of course 9/11 hit, and immediately we were basically considered an airport hotel. We were that close. We had a lot of flights, flight crews staying there, and I had to, I think, meet with the entire executive staff. Didn't lay anybody off, but we had to have very serious conversations about lowering compensation.
Belt tightening.
Exactly. Yeah. Laying off some staff members in the lower ranks, and when you're doing 20% less room inventory, you don't need 20% less people to serve them. It's just the way the economy works.
Of all the hotels that you've looked at a lot of different hotel sites and deals. Can you name a hotel deal that you passed on that in hindsight you wish you hadn't?
Yes, I can name a bunch of them, but I guess the one that really stands out was right in the midst of 2008. There was a hotel that was about 3/4 of the way built on Nantucket, right next to Main Street. That we flew Kevin's jet down there to look at it, toured it. It was probably still needed a few $1 million to finish it. But they were shopping the note, the banks it was in the workout department at the banks, and we could have had it for $3 million. And today the property's, probably worth, I don't know, 30, 40
million.
Yeah. We could have been all in, somewhere close to 10. But it would have been a beautiful property, walking distance to everything. It's right in downtown.
Well, despite my asking that question, I've learned to never look back.
I almost forgot about it until you brought it up again.
Well, you make the best decision you can at the time, and you move forward because
Exactly.
you can't change it.
Right.
What advice would you give somebody looking to get into the hotel development business?
If you can start in operations for a decade or so,
Like you did.
Like I did, I think that's been my competitive advantage, because I can understand, looking at a hotel, what's not driving it, what is driving it. Operations will tell you so much about where to build the hotel, what that market needs. Because as my father said early on, it's the easiest business to run. The first guest that comes through the door will tell you exactly what to do.
And looking into your crystal ball, which I know you have one, for the next 10 years, what's the hotel business look like in Portland or Maine? Maybe that's too general, but say in the greater Portland area. Are we going to see a continuation of all these new hotels going up? We're going to see some foreclosures when the economy turns. What's going to happen?
Well, the franchise aren't going to like me for saying this, but Marriott now has 32 brands. Hilton has, just short of that.
And they're not shy about putting one next to the other, right?
Right. So, I think the boutique hotels, soft branding like the Autograph that Jim did, which you still have a connection to the brand, but your design is your own for that particular market, for that particular guest in that market, is going to be the next 10 years. This next generation wants something that's truly unique. The brands, why do people stay at brands? Because they want peace of mind knowing that whether they're in LA or Boston or Chicago, their Comfort Inn or their Courtyard or their Hilton Garden Inn is going to feel and look the same. It's the McDonald's of hospitality.
No matter where you go, you get the same experience.
That worked for our generation. Next generation, I'm not so sure. They're looking for an individual experience. This is not the same outlook that we had. They know that they can go to TripAdvisor to see what the best hotels are in town, and that's what they're doing. They're looking at, the rating institutions to see, how this hotel is rated, and they'll read a few reviews, and then they'll look at the location, and then they'll book.
So how
and that's
important
agnostic to the brand.
So how important is TripAdvisor to the hospitality business?
Studies have been done on TripAdvisor, and as long you don't have to be number one, you don't have to be number two or number three. You have to be on the first page.
How important are loyalty points, or whatever you call them? When you stay at a Marriott, you get points, and everybody seems to do that.
Well, the industry's facing a conundrum in this area because we've been at peak occupancy now or close to peak for the last couple of years. And when you're at peak occupancy, you should see ADRs, average daily rates, rising at a faster pace than they have been. And we haven't seen that rise. So we've been fairly, flat compared to past cycles. And, my industry buddies and I talk about this all the time. There's one of several things going on. Either the e-commerce market, Airbnb, is knocking the wind out of that sail, the demand tightening. Or it's just what you just pointed out, the Marriott Rewards program or Hilton Rewards program. They go back and they rejigger the program every year and make it, more difficult to increase your real ADR, which is basically average daily rate increase minus consumer price index.
So to the consumer, though, those points are important, I would assume.
Consumer, yeah, it's very important, but they don't care where they get them from. They'll, some people, the road warriors, will stay in Marriotts predominantly, but they know it's city that's not available, or the better hotel is Hilton. They'll have
enough points at Hilton to switch over.
Yeah, they'll have 3 or 4 different cards in their wallet.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh,
you're what? You're in the early 50s?
Yeah, I'm 56.
Well, that's not early 50s.
No, it's mid 50s.
Okay. So where do you see yourself when you're in your mid 60s? What are you going to be doing?
I think I'll be doing the same thing, not with the day-to-day that I had been doing the last 40 years or so. I think it's going to be very careful picking really exciting projects on the right timeline. I love building a project in a recession because you have the longest running curve in front of you.
And And you also have cheaper construction pricing. And
It all. So I've been waiting. We'll see what happens. This might be a,
I'm not a fan of recession, so I hope you're wrong.
I'm not either. But it does open up some different opportunities.
What's the one key quality you possess that's resulted in your success?
I was lucky enough to have my parents, my wife, my friends, all these great mentors through my life, to keep me on the straight and narrow, because I wasn't born with anything.
Just think, Mark, you could have climbed that One Canal Plaza, hurt yourself, fallen, and we wouldn't be sitting here today.
Been fired.
So if it wasn't
been
for
in
your
jail,
father
yeah.
threatening to fire you. Well, that's it for today's episode of the Boulos Beat. Special thanks to Marc Dugas for being my guest. And if you'd like to learn more about the Boulos Company, please be sure to visit us at www.boulos.com. You can find us at the Boulos Company on Facebook and LinkedIn, and at the Boulos Co. on Instagram and Twitter. And lastly, if you want to know the secret to owning real estate, it's pretty simple. Just be sure to outlive your debt.